Hey friend, Chris here from WideLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Welcome to video number 40, the final video in our Newbie to Ninja series. If you've stuck with me throughout this entire series, thank you so much. I've tried the best I can over 40 videos to deliver the best Logic Pro beginner course I could. And I hope it has been of tremendous benefit to you as you continue to grow, learn, and use this awesome application. But of course, there's more to Logic Pro beyond what I've shown you in this series. So be sure to check out the other videos and content on the Why Logic Pro Rules website, as well as the YouTube channel. Today, in this final video of our Newbie to Ninja series, I want to show you how to bounce and share your projects, your music, your productions with anyone you so choose. This could be friends, family, collaborators, uploading for distribution, or anyone else. I want to show you how easy this is to accomplish. Once again, I have the same hard rock riff from the last video. Let's take a listen to just a couple seconds of this riff so we know what we're working with today. Here we go. Cool, so there's our riff. Now really, there's two different ways that we can approach sharing our projects. Either number one, you could share the project as a whole with all the audio files, all the MIDI, everything with a collaborator like a bandmate or a producer. Or number two, for the other 99.9% of times that you want to share your music with someone, you can share what is called a bounce, which is a single stereo file that you can then share with your friends, with your family, or anyone else, and they can play back your entire song, your entire production in all its glory on their cell phone, their laptop, or anywhere else. So let's start there. Let's go to the menu bar at the top and click on File. And from here, let's go down to Bounce, and let's select the option to bounce this project or section. From here, the bounce dialog pops up, offering us so many different options for bouncing our production out of Logic Pro. However, if we close the bounce dialog by pressing on Cancel, you can also open the same dialog by going down just to the bounce button on the stereo output channel strip, either in the inspector or in the mixer. If we click, we get that same dialog, or you can just use the key command on your Mac's keyboard, Command and B. In the upper left-hand side of the bounce dialog, we have several different destination options for bouncing our productions out of Logic Pro. We're not going to dig in depth into all four options today. Instead, we'll focus on the two most common destinations when you want to share your work as a bounce. Each destination has its own set of details that you can customize, and you can choose to bounce your project to that particular destination just by clicking on the checkbox directly to the left of its title. Right, so we've now enabled the option to customize and bounce to an MP3 destination. Our first option at the top is a destination of PCM, and this bounce can take several different shapes. To start, we have the option to choose a file format for our bounce. At the top, we have AIFF, which stands for Audio Interchange File Format. This was a format that was developed by Apple. Or you can choose to bounce to a WAV or waveform audio file format file, or you can choose to output your bounce to a core audio format file. For most use cases, AIFF or WAV is the most typical file formats to use when using PCM as a destination. And generally speaking, WAV files are the most widely accepted file format. The core audio format is more of a container for audio, and you've seen it in use when you use Apple loops in Logic Pro. So I'll choose WAV for my file format. Next, we can choose the resolution for our bounce. In this dropdown, we have four different options, starting with 8-bit and going all the way to 32-bit floating point. Now, the case of bit depth really is a bigger topic than this video can handle, and it really depends on what your intention is for your bounce. Generally speaking, if you're going to be uploading this bounce to a distributor to distribute to Apple Music, to Spotify, or anywhere else, or if this bounce is intended for a physical medium, such as a CD, the standard for online streaming and physical distribution is that of a resolution of 16-bit and a sample rate of 44,100 Hertz. Now again, this is a general statement when it comes to distributing your tracks online or in a physical medium, and they're based on CD standards for resolution and sample rate. These days, some distributors as well as online streaming platforms are accepting higher resolution files, so obviously check the help documents of the website for your distributor if you're planning on uploading your music for distribution online. If you're just sharing a WAV file with a collaborator or a friend, I personally choose to bounce to a 24-bit WAV file as opposed to 16-bit, 32-bit, or 8-bit. 8-bit files are just unnecessarily going to reduce the dynamic range of your bounces. And a 32-bit floating point bounce is really if you're intending to use that bounce in software that can support 32-bit floating point files. So for the sake of our conversation, I'm just intending to share this with myself. I'm going to choose a resolution of 24-bit. Next, we have sample rate. There are many different sample rates to choose, and this can be a point of confusion. And again, the intended purpose of your bounce determines what sample rate you should choose. So if you want to listen to a lossless high-res bounce of your project for yourself, or to send to a collaborator, or to send to a mastering engineer, then you want to choose the same sample rate as your project sample rate. Now, how do you know what your project sample rate is? Well, you can find out if we cancel out of the bounce dialog. We can go up to File, go down to Project Settings, and select the Audio Project Settings. Right here, we can see the sample rate of this project, which is 44.1 kilohertz or 44,100 hertz. But it can also be seen by clicking on the drop-down triangle in the LCD and going down to Customize. And as you can see, I have the sample rate right here in the LCD. But if you don't see this right here, let's right-click in the control bar and Customize. And right under LCD, we have this option to introduce the sample rate to the LCD. And the sample rate is typically chosen when you first create a project. It's in that new project dialog when you're choosing your audio interface and inputs and outputs and all those details. All right, Command B to bring back the bounce dialog. So again, I suggest if you're just sharing the project with yourself or with a friend and you really are not intending to distribute this track quite yet, I would set the sample rate to the same exact sample rate as your project is right now. But if this bounce will be the bounce that's uploaded for distribution or for printing to CD, or you just want to hear the official quote-unquote version of your bounce as it would be heard on these different mediums, then you should choose 41,100 hertz. Again, sample rate and bit depth, that is a bigger conversation than today's video. So I'll choose 44.1 to stay consistent with my project. And next, you have the option to choose the file type. You could choose either a split file, which is to split our stereo bounce into two separate left and right audio files, or you can choose interleaved, which means a single stereo file, which includes both left and right channels. Honestly, 99.9% of the time, you're just going to want to leave this as interleaved. And then lastly, we have the option for dithering. Now again, a really big topic, but generally speaking, if you're going to be reducing the resolution and or the sample rate of your bounce from that of the original sample rate and bit depth of your project, you'll want to choose one of these three different options for dithering your bounce. In a nutshell, dither is a process of adding white noise to an audio file to mask any sort of degradation that can be caused by a reduction in bit depth or sample rate. Obviously, there's different flavors of dither, and we have 4 altogether. Which one should you use? Honestly, I'm going to guess you're not going to be able to tell a difference between any of these options when you listen to the resulting bounce, but try creating a bounce for each of these options and listen back to what they sound like. You might be surprised. You might prefer the power number 2 over the power 1 or 3. And of course, we have this 4th option that's not currently available to us, but if we change the resolution to 16-bit, we can now choose the UV22HR option. Personally, regardless if I'm bouncing to 24-bit or 16-bit, I always choose a dithering option. And remember, you should only use dither once when you're bouncing a track. So if you have any plugins on the stereo output that also can add dither, you want to choose between the dither from that plugin or from the bounce dialog, not both. So in my case, I'm going to share this project with myself, so I'll include dither. If I was going to distribute this track to streaming on a physical medium, I would definitely make sure to include dither after I made the appropriate sample rate and bit resolution adjustments based on my distributor. But if you're sharing this track with someone like a mastering engineer, you want to make sure to definitely not include dither. Make sure the sample rate's identical to your project sample rate, and I recommend to leave the resolution to 24-bit unless your mastering engineer accepts 32-bit files. All right, after that, we can choose the start and end for our bounce based on bars and beats. So we could just, click, hold, and drag on the start or end values. And these start and end values by default are based on the start of our project, as noted by the little gray triangle right here that's set to bar 1, which you can actually adjust. I'll have to close the bounce dialog by pressing escape. I can try to adjust the beginning of my project by clicking, holding, and dragging on that triangle. I can't seem to be able to move the start of the project any further to the right, but if I click, hold, and drag to the left, I can introduce some time to the beginning of the project. So I'll undo using Command and Z, and we can also adjust the end of our project by using the little gray triangle at the end. Click, hold, and drag to either increase or add length to the project or to reduce length. So I've now set the end of the project to bar 14. If we open the bounce dialog once again using Command and B, all right, we can see the end is a little finer than bar 14, but we can make an adjustment if we need to. There we go. However, you can also set the length for your bounce based on the cycle range, which again is the yellow bar right above the tracks area in the ruler at the top. So check it out, Command and B. Now the start and end of our project is based on the yellow cycle range, starting at bar 1 and ending at bar 5. I'm going to actually leave this for now, and we'll bounce just a section of this riff. The next two options are to bounce either in real time or offline. When you choose real-time mode, when we click OK to begin the bounce will literally play back in real time. It's a great way of doing a quality assurance listen through as your track is bouncing out. So in case there's something that's not quite right, you can go back and fix it. Or you can choose offline. So the track won't play back in real time. Instead, Logic bounces your project without having to play through the entire thing. While you don't get that listen through, it's a real benefit because it goes a lot faster than listening in real time. In fact, let's give it a try right now. I'll select real time and click OK. We're going to save this to a dedicated bounces folder that was created in my project folder, and we'll just call this bounce 1. Here we go. As you heard, when I began the bounce process, the track played back in real time. Whereas, if we choose offline, and we'll call this bounce 2, and we'll even add the name offline, here we go. I mean, look how much faster that was as opposed to the first bounce. If we go to the Finder, go to Sharing Projects, go to our Bounces folder, and I'll even rename this to Real Time. All right. Next, we could choose to include the audio tail in our bounce. Typically, you choose this option if you have perhaps some reverb or delay tails that are occurring at the end of the song that you want to ring out and you don't want them to be cut off. So remember, our start of our project is set to bar 1 and the end is set to bar 5. Let's take a look at what happens. We'll call this audio tail and we'll name it bounce 3. Here we go. All right, so let's take a look at a separate project that I have open in the background. And let's bring up the Finder, select all 3 bounces, and drag them right in. And we'll create new tracks and click OK. Well, this looks pretty interesting. We have our real-time bounce. We have our offline bounce. And then we have our audio tail bounce. That's pretty clever, right? I mean, right at bar 5, the audio did not stop playback. In fact, there was plenty of audio past bar 5. And yet, Logic included just the reverb tails of the drums, of the guitars, and anything else. We can also have any tempo information embedded into the resulting audio file or bounce that we create. This can be helpful if you want to load this bounce into another project. And then we have Normalize. When we set Normalize to on, our track's level will be adjusted so that the very top of the peaks in our audio will be normalized or boosted to 0 decibels. So for example, if I adjust the level of the project, so we're reducing the level by 10 decibels, if we listen, we can see the peaks of our audio is roughly around -11 on the peak meter. But if we include normalizing and click OK, and we'll call this bounce 4 normalize, Okay, let's switch to our other project. And let's squash things up a bit. Bring in the Finder. Drag this in. Okay, we could see that our track is no quieter than the other tracks. In fact, if we take a listen and a look, it's peaking right around 0 dB. And in fact, that's louder than our original bounces. As the other bounces are peaking at -1. So if you want a quick and easy way to boost the entire mix, you certainly can use normalization. If you're sending the track to a mastering engineer, you probably want to turn this off. If we go back to the other project and set normalization to overload protection only, the normalizing process only comes into the picture if our mix is louder than 0 dB, because we risk clipping the entire mix if it's too loud. So if we set this to +6, it's going to be a little loud. We can see we're peaking right around 5 decibels. So let's bounce. With normalization set to overload protection only, click OK. We'll call this bounce 5, and we're going to call this overload protection. Here we go. And let's bounce once more. We'll turn this off. Click OK. Set this as bounce 6, no overload protection. Okay, let's flip back. Bring up the Finder. And drag these in. Interesting. There's the overload protection. There's the no protection. And if we take a listen and a look, and I'll even reduce the level of this by about 6 decibels so we can hear these side by side at the same level. One sounds clipped while the other doesn't. So overload protection can protect you if you're worried about accidentally clipping your entire mix, though really we should make sure to get our levels right in our project before ever needing this option. And that brings me to one other detail that is incredibly important when you're bouncing your mixes. You may notice that you have a stereo output fader, as well as a master fader that you can adjust up here in the control bar or right here in the mixer. And I can't tell you how many Logic Pro projects I've seen where folks will be looking at the meters on like the multimeter or the level meters that has been placed on the stereo output and look at the loudness values of their project. And they'll say, hey, I'm hitting a loudness of -13, and my true peak values are right around -1. The loudness of my track must be in great shape, without ever considering the level adjustments of the stereo output fader or the master fader. So let's bounce this right now, and I'll make sure to leave normalization set to off and click OK. And we'll call this bounce 7, fader adjustments. Let's flip to the other project, go to the Finder, and bring in bounce 7. And take a look at how loud this mix is as compared to overload protection. That is a dramatic difference in volume. And then I'll receive emails from folks who are like, hey, why is my mix not sounding loud enough? And this is one of the reasons why. So I suggest instead of using the master fader or stereo output fader as a global volume control for your project, use the knob on your audio interface. Use the controls for sound on your Mac. That's what they're there for, to adjust the volume of your speakers and headphone outputs. And also, anytime you bounce out your project, I suggest that you should include last in the plugin chain a limiter such as the adaptive limiter or the regular limiter. Choose one or the other, but place it last in the chain. It's fine that the multimeter is after the limiter because the multimeter is just analyzing the audio. It's not contributing any sort of sonic adjustments to the audio. And again, this is a murky subject, but I suggest that you set the output ceiling to -1. For look ahead, just set it to whatever it says right under the optimal look ahead section. This will change over time based on the incoming audio, so you can apply it if it changes by clicking on apply. The output ceiling will make sure that you don't clip your mix by going above 0 dB, and then you boost the gain for your entire mix using the adaptive limiter's gain knob until you see about, I would say, 1 to 3 decibels of gain reduction on this gain reduction meter. So let's take a listen and a look as I adjust. And that should get you to a healthy level for bouncing out your mix. So the adaptive limiter allows you to boost the level of your mix to a healthy level, and the output ceiling ensures that you don't cause any audible degradation to your bounce by making sure your mix doesn't clip or go above 0 dB. Cool. So I recommend the PCM Destination if you want to share a high quality, lossless version of your bounce. If you're going to be distributing this track, you definitely want to use the PCM Destination. However, a WAV file can be kind of big in its size, and their size can be prohibitive to add to an email as an attachment or to send to a friend via the Messages app. So in those cases, when you want to share just a lightweight file, I recommend that you choose a destination of MP3. So let's select it. Just like PCM, MP3 has its own set of details that you can configure. Instead of going through all of them, I recommend that you set the bitrate for both mono and stereo to that of the highest quality of 320 kilobytes per second. And I would make sure to set the quality to the best encoding, filter any frequencies below 10 Hertz, and leave the stereo mode to joint stereo. MP3 is a compressed format. It results in a smaller file size. And as a result, because of that compression, there's a little bit of degradation in the audio. But honestly, for sharing with friends and family or just to quickly listen to your projects as you're on the go, I think MP3s are just fine. So let's bounce. So we'll call this bounce 8. Okay, if we bounce back to our other project, bring in the Finder, we now have bounce 8, which is an MP3, but we also have a WAV file. And that's because in the bounce dialog, I selected both PCM and MP3. And that's right, you can bounce to multiple destinations from a single bounce dialog. So let's bring in the Finder, drag these in. And take a listen to both back to back. If we look in the project browser using key command F, expand the column here, we can see that this is our WAV file. And this must be the MP3, even though it says AIF. Let's take a listen. Can you hear a difference? I'm going to leave that up to you. But if we look in the Finder, we take a look at the file size. The MP3 comes in at 596 kilobytes, whereas our WAV file comes in at 3.9 megabytes for the 4 bars of audio. So there you go. One is much bigger than the other. One is higher resolution than the other. Last couple details for you when sharing your projects. If we go up to File and go down to Share, we can first share our project directly to the Apple Music app. We can choose a quality of anything from low quality, 64 kilobytes per second, up to an uncompressed file. And we can export the cycle area only or the length of a selected region. And then click Share. Additionally, if we go back to File, go down to Share, you can also share directly to your SoundCloud account. Cool, so you could log directly in and post your song right from Logic Pro to Soundcloud. And lastly, go to File, go down to Share. You can share your project directly to another device or a friend, either using Airdrop or Mail. I'll choose Airdrop, but these details apply to both Airdrop and the Mail options. Cool, so we could share a bounce of our project once again directly using Airdrop or Mail by selecting the Song option, and we can give the bounce its own unique name. So we'll call it Airdrop. And then we can set the quality once again to either low quality up to uncompressed AIFF or WAV. And then we can click Share. So Logic is bouncing the track in place, and now I can share this with myself to the iPad or to my girlfriend in the other room to her device. So I'll click Cancel. If we go back to File, go down to Share, and choose Airdrop, we can also share the project as a whole. So let's select Project and click on Share. And as it turns out, there's a catch here. Because my project is structured as a folder as opposed to a package, the assets of my project, so the audio files, the impulse responses, sampler data, and anything else that could be saved with your projects, will unfortunately not be included when sharing the project. So instead of using Airdrop or Mail in Logic Pro to share the project, I would instead have to do it the old-fashioned way and load the project directly to a file sharing service like iCloud or Dropbox or anything else. However, let's cancel. And let's save this project now to my desktop as a package. And let's save. And let's load the package. All right, if we now go to File, go down to Share, let's choose Airdrop, and choose the project option and click Share. All right, so now we don't get any sort of warning, and that's because when we save our projects as a package, everything related to the project is self-contained within the project file. So I can share the entire project with someone else if I want to. And of course, if you notice at the bottom of the share options, you can also share your project to GarageBand for iOS, which will create a bounce of your project and load it into a GarageBand iOS project. Cool, so we can see this will be saved to my iCloud account, which I can then open on my iPad or iPhone. So there you have it, my friend, the conclusion to our Newbie to Ninja series. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you for more next week on Why Logic Pro Rules. Take care.